I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Right now, your brain is doing something it has done every single day of your life, preparing itself to rest. Scientists have spent decades trying to understand what happens inside that quiet pause. Tonight, you'll discover what your brain is actually doing during a nap, and understand why this smallest act of rest may be one of the most quietly powerful things a human being can do. Welcome to Sleepless Scientist Night. Wherever you are right now, perhaps lying still in the early evening quiet, or resting in that soft, unhurried space between one thing and the next, allow yourself to settle into this. We'll drift through 100 sleep science facts about the napping brain. From the moment your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts begin to loosen, to the deep cellular work unfolding in silence beneath your awareness, to the ancient rhythms that have been guiding human rest long before we had words for any of it. These gentle journeys through sleep science create a quiet community of curious, resting minds. A soft like subscribe or sharing this with someone who needs a little peace tonight creates a pathway for more sleepy souls to find their way here, and brings us closer to protecting this peaceful space. One sleepy soul at a time. It means the world to us that you're here. Settle deeper into wherever you're resting now. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw unclench. You don't need to memorize a single thing tonight. You don't need to hold on to any of this. Just feel that slow, warm heaviness beginning to spread through you, like the last light of afternoon fading gently behind a curtain. There is nowhere else to be. This moment is yours. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're resting where the brain quietly begins its most important work. Let your mind soften with the rhythm of your own breathing. And now we begin. A nap is not simply a smaller version of nighttime sleep. It is its own biological event, with its own stages, its own chemistry, and its own purpose. Researchers at institutions, including the National Institutes of Health, have confirmed that even a short nap of 10 to 20 minutes activates measurable changes in brain activity, hormonal balance, and cognitive function. The sleeping brain does not go quiet. It shifts into a different mode of operation, one that nighttime sleep can supplement but never fully replace. Every nap, however brief, is a complete act of restoration in miniature. The word nap traces back to the Old English word hanapian, meaning to doze or slumber lightly. For most of human history, an afternoon rest was not considered laziness. It was simply part of the day. Ancient Roman culture divided the day around a midday rest called the meridiatio. Medieval European communities often paused in the early afternoon for sleep. The modern industrial schedule, with its single consolidated block of nighttime rest, is historically unusual. For the vast majority of human existence, resting twice a day was simply what bodies did. Your brain operates on a rhythm called the circadian cycle, an approximately 24-hour internal clock governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a tiny cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons in the hypothalamus. But there is a second, lesser-known rhythm layered on top of it, the ultradian rhythm, which cycles roughly every 90 to 120 minutes throughout the day. This shorter rhythm creates natural dips in alertness and energy, most noticeably in the early afternoon, typically between 1 and 3 in the afternoon. That drowsiness you feel after midday is not a sign of weakness. It is your brain following its oldest schedule. During the afternoon circadian dip, Core body temperature drops slightly. Melatonin levels rise briefly, and reaction times slow measurably. Studies using electroencephalography, which measures the brain's electrical activity, show that alpha wave activity increases during this window. The same kind of relaxed, unfocused brain state associated with the early stages of sleep. Your brain is, in a very literal sense, leaning towards sleep in the early afternoon, regardless of how much rest you had the night before. The dip is not caused by lunch. It is caused by biology. The brain does not transition from wakefulness to sleep in a single step. It moves through a sequence of stages, each with its own electrical signature. Stage 1, called N1, is the lightest phase, that drowsy threshold where thoughts become soft and disconnected, where you may feel yourself drifting without quite arriving anywhere. Stage 2, called N2, is a deeper stage marked by specific bursts of electrical activity called sleep spindles and K-complexes. Stage 3 forms the deepest non-REM phase, slow wave sleep, and then there is REM, rapid eye movement sleep, where dreaming most often occurs. A nap can move through several of these stages depending on its length. A nap of 10 to 20 minutes is sometimes called a power nap, though researchers tend to prefer the term Stage 2 nap. During this window, the brain spends most of its time in N1 and N2 sleep, the lighter stages. This duration is enough to boost alertness, improve mood, and sharpen reaction time, without producing what scientists call sleep inertia, the groggy, disoriented feeling that follows waking from deeper sleep stages. The 10 to 20-minute nap has been consistently shown in studies conducted at institutions including Harvard and the Salk Institute to produce the most immediately usable benefits with the fewest side effects. Sleep spindles, those short bursts of rhythmic brain activity that appear during Stage 2 sleep, are among the most studied features of the napping brain. They appear as brief waveforms on an electroencephalogram, typically lasting half a second to 2 seconds, occurring roughly 12 to 15 times per minute during N2 sleep. Researchers now believe sleep spindles play a meaningful role in memory consolidation, specifically in the transfer of new information from the hippocampus, where short-term memories are stored, to the neocortex, where they become part of long-term knowledge. Each spindle, in a sense, is the brain quietly filing something away. The hippocampus can be thought of as the brain's short-term memory buffer. Throughout the day, it collects new experiences, facts, and sensory impressions, holding them temporarily while the rest of the brain continues processing incoming information. Research from the University of California, Berkeley, published in the journal Nature Neuroscience, found that when the hippocampus becomes too full, overloaded with new information, the brain's ability to absorb and retain further learning declines measurably. A nap, even a brief one, appears to clear this buffer. After a midday nap, subjects in that study showed learning capacity restored nearly to morning levels. One of the most consistent findings in nap research is that napping improves what scientists call declarative memory, the kind of memory that stores facts, events, and information you can consciously recall. A 2023 study published in the journal Sleep found that participants who napped for 60 to 90 minutes after a learning session retained significantly more information 24 hours later than those who remained awake. The napping brain was not resting from learning. It was continuing to learn, in its own quiet language, while the body lay still. What makes the napping brain remarkable is not simply what it does, but what it does without any instruction. You do not have to tell your brain to consolidate memories during a nap. You do not have to ask it to clear the hippocampal buffer, to generate sleep spindles, or to regulate stress hormones. These processes begin automatically, governed by systems that evolved long before humans had language or self-awareness. The brain's restorative intelligence operates entirely outside conscious control, and in that, there is something quietly wonderful. The knowledge that rest is not passive. Even when you do nothing, something is being done for you. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, plays a central role in regulating alertness and the stress response. Its levels naturally peak in the early morning, helping the body wake, and gradually decline throughout the day. Chronic sleep deprivation, including accumulated sleep debt from shortened nights, keeps cortisol levels elevated throughout the day and into the night, a state associated with increased anxiety, impaired immune function, and accelerated cognitive aging. A nap of even 30 minutes has been shown in studies supported by the National Institutes of Health to measurably reduce cortisol levels in sleep-deprived individuals. The body's own chemistry shifts in response to even a small period of rest. Norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter closely related to adrenaline, is released during periods of stress and focused attention. During waking hours, norepinephrine accumulates in the locus coeruleus, a small region of the brainstem that acts as the brain's primary alertness center. When norepinephrine levels become too high, attention becomes narrowed, decision-making suffers, and emotional regulation weakens. Sleep, including the light sleep of a nap, reduces norepinephrine activity in the locus coeruleus, effectively resetting the brain's stress response system. After a nap, the locus coeruleus begins waking hours again with a lighter chemical load. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain most responsible for judgment, planning, and emotional regulation, is among the most sensitive to sleep deprivation. Even partial sleep loss, equivalent to sleeping 2 hours less than needed for just a few nights, measurably reduces prefrontal cortex activity on brain imaging scans. Decision quality declines, emotional reactions become more intense, and the ability to consider future consequences weakens. A study from the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research found that naps of 60 minutes could partially compensate for this prefrontal deficit, restoring measured cognitive function closer to fully rested baselines. The amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, becomes notably more reactive under conditions of sleep deprivation. A landmark study from Matthew Walker's lab at the University of California, Berkeley, found that subjects with restricted sleep showed substantially higher amygdala activity when exposed to emotionally charged material, and that the normal calming connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala appeared weakened. In simple terms, sleep loss makes emotional responses more intense and harder to regulate. A single afternoon nap of 90 minutes was found to gently reverse this heightened reactivity, allowing the emotional centers of the brain to settle back toward a more balanced and restful baseline. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter central to attention, memory formation, and the regulation of REM sleep. During waking hours, acetylcholine levels are high, supporting focused cognition. During non-REM sleep, the slow wave and spindle-rich stages that dominate shorter naps, acetylcholine levels drop significantly. This drop appears to be an essential part of the memory consolidation process, allowing the hippocampus to replay the day's events without the interference of incoming new information. The quiet chemical landscape of nap sleep is not a neutral absence of activity. It is the precise environment the brain needs to do its consolidation work. Heart rate variability. The slight, natural variation in time between successive heartbeats is considered one of the most reliable physiological markers of the autonomic nervous system's health and resilience. High heart rate variability is associated with strong cardiovascular health, good stress regulation, and cognitive flexibility. Sleep deprivation consistently reduces heart rate variability. Studies measuring physiological recovery have found that a midday nap of as little as 25 minutes increases heart rate variability in the hours following waking, suggesting a measurable restoration of autonomic nervous system balance from a single brief period of sleep. In 2023, researchers from University College London and the University of the Republic in Uruguay published a study in the journal Sleep Health, examining whether habitual napping and brain health might be causally linked, using a technique called Mendelian randomization, which looks at genetic variants present from birth to reduce confounding. They analyzed data from nearly 379,000 people in the UK Biobank. They found that individuals genetically predisposed to nap tended to have measurably larger total brain volume. The researchers estimated that the difference in brain volume between habitual nappers and non-nappers was equivalent to somewhere between 2.5 and 6.5 years of normal brain aging. Notably, the study did not find differences in hippocampal volume or standard cognitive tests, suggesting the relationship between napping and brain health may be more structural than immediately measurable. The findings add a quiet but meaningful thread to the growing picture of rest as long-term neuroprotection. The glymphatic system is a network of channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels that functions as the brain's waste clearance system. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, the spaces between brain cells expand by as much as 60% in animal studies, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow more freely through the glymphatic channels and flush out metabolic waste products, including amyloid beta and tau proteins, which are associated with neurodegenerative disease when they accumulate. This 60% expansion was first observed in mice, published in the journal Science in 2013. Remarkably, in late 2024, researchers at Oregon Health and Science University published the first direct imaging evidence of this glymphatic network in human brain tissue, confirming through neurosurgery patients what had previously been observed only in animal models. The brain's quiet housekeeping system, it turns out, is not only real in mice, it is real in us. While the full extent of glymphatic activity during short naps specifically remains under active investigation, current evidence suggests that even brief periods of sleep may support some degree of this clearance process. The word siesta comes from the Latin sexta hora, the sixth hour of the day, roughly noon by ancient Roman timekeeping. The tradition of a midday rest period appears across dozens of cultures throughout recorded history, in Mediterranean Europe, across the Middle East, throughout South Asia, and in equatorial regions of Central and South America. Researchers studying cross-cultural sleep patterns have noted that biphasic sleep, 2 sleep periods per day, appears more aligned with the human body's circadian architecture than the single consolidated sleep period that industrialization normalized. In some interpretations, the siesta may have been the original sleep pattern. The relationship between napping and cognitive performance in high-stakes professions has been carefully studied. In a landmark study conducted in partnership with NASA, commercial airline pilots on trans-Pacific flights were given a 40-minute rest opportunity during the cruise phase of flight, during which they slept an average of about 26 minutes. The resting pilots maintained their baseline performance during the later stages of the flight. When fatigue would normally cause performance to decline, the non-resting pilots, by contrast, showed a 34% increase in performance lapses, those brief moments of slowed response that represent the brain momentarily loosening its grip on alertness. The finding, published in the Journal of Sleep Research, suggested that in demanding, time-sensitive environments, a brief nap does not simply refresh. It quietly protects. Serotonin, the neurotransmitter most associated with mood regulation and emotional well-being, follows a diurnal rhythm, rising through the morning and falling through the afternoon and evening. Low serotonin activity is associated with irritability, low motivation, and reduced tolerance for frustration. The drop in serotonin activity during the early to mid-afternoon coincides almost exactly with the circadian alertness dip described earlier. Research examining mood outcomes following afternoon naps has consistently found improvements in self-reported mood and reduced irritability in napping subjects compared to non-napping controls. A short nap, in part, appears to restore serotonin dynamics toward morning-level baselines. The concept of sleep pressure, the biological drive to sleep that accumulates during waking hours, is governed largely by a molecule called adenosine. As neurons fire throughout the day, adenosine accumulates in the spaces between brain cells, binding to receptors and progressively increasing the sensation of drowsiness. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, temporarily masking sleep pressure without actually reducing it. Sleep clears adenosine. Even a short nap metabolizes a meaningful portion of accumulated adenosine, reducing sleep pressure and restoring alertness. This is why the combination of a short nap immediately followed by caffeine, sometimes called a coffee nap, has been studied as a practical method of temporary alertness restoration. Theta waves, slow, rhythmic brain oscillations occurring at 4 to 8 cycles per second, are associated with the transition between wakefulness and sleep, with creative ideation, and with the hypnagogic state, that peculiar threshold experience of drifting consciousness where thoughts become loosely associative, imagery appears spontaneously, and the boundary between waking thought and dreaming softens. Thomas Edison famously used a technique of holding steel balls in his hands while dozing in a chair, when sleep deepened enough that his muscles relaxed. The falling balls would wake him, keeping him in this theta-rich liminal state for creative thinking. The science behind his instinct has since been confirmed by electroencephalographic research. A study published in 2021 in the journal Science Advances followed up on Edison's technique, asking participants to hold an object while falling asleep and confirming via electroencephalography that the N1 sleep stage, rich in theta waves, corresponded to the highest rate of creative problem-solving upon waking. Participants woken from N1 sleep were 3 times more likely to discover a hidden mathematical shortcut in a number task compared to those who stayed fully awake. The hypnagogic threshold, that first soft dissolving into sleep, appears to be a state of genuinely enhanced creative access. The resting brain, it turns out, does some of its most novel thinking precisely as it is falling asleep. By now, a picture has begun to form. The napping brain is not switched off. It is not idle. It is clearing, consolidating, regulating, restoring. It is running processes that waking cognition depends on. But that waking cognition cannot run for itself. Adenosine is metabolized. Sleep spindles fire. The hippocampus transfers its holdings. Stress hormones resether. The prefrontal cortex finds its footing again. The amygdala quiets. All of this in as little as 20 minutes. The nap is not a pause in the brain's work. It is a different kind of work. One the brain has been perfecting for longer than our species has had a name for sleep. Let's pause here. Gently. Every cell in your body knows how to do this. The transition towards sleep has been rehearsed billions of times. By your body. By your ancestors' bodies. By every living organism that ever learned to rest. You are not learning something new tonight. You are remembering something ancient. Your breath is already slower now. Your muscles are already releasing their small, held tensions. In your jaw, your hands, along your spine. You didn't ask them to. They simply began. Because sleep knows its own way in. Let your body continue that work without you. Now we continue. Not all nap lengths produce the same effects. Sleep researchers have identified 3 broadly distinct nap durations, each with its own profile. The 60-minute nap, which is likely to include some slow-wave sleep, offers stronger memory consolidation benefits, particularly for factual and emotional learning, but may carry moderate sleep inertia upon waking. The 90-minute nap, which typically completes a full sleep cycle, including REM sleep, provides the broadest range of cognitive and emotional benefits, including both procedural skill refinement and emotional processing. We have already explored the 10 to 20-minute nap. These longer forms simply open different doors in the same house of rest. Sleep inertia, the groggy, disoriented feeling upon waking, is caused by residual slow-wave sleep activity in the brain. When woken from deep slow-wave sleep, the brain's prefrontal cortex takes several minutes to return to full waking function, during which reaction time, decision-making, and mood are measurably affected. The duration of sleep inertia depends on the depth of sleep from which a person wakes, individual variation in sleep architecture, and the time of day. For most people, sleep inertia following a nap dissipates within 10 to 30 minutes. Understanding this allows nappers to schedule their rest and their subsequent activities accordingly, stepping gently back into alertness rather than expecting immediate clarity. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, was first described in 1953 by researchers Eugene Aserinsky and Nathaniel Kleitman at the University of Chicago. Using electroencephalographic monitoring, they observed rapid movements of the eyes beneath closed lids and corresponding changes in brain electrical activity that resembled waking brain patterns rather than the slow waves of deep sleep. This discovery fundamentally changed the scientific understanding of what the brain does during sleep. Prior to their work, sleep had been assumed to be a relatively uniform state of reduced brain activity. Aserinsky and Kleitman revealed it as a dynamic, active, cycling process, one that no understanding of napping would be complete without acknowledging. REM sleep is associated with the consolidation of procedural memory, the kind of memory that underlies skills, habits, and learned sequences of movement. Musicians who nap following practice sessions and enter REM sleep show improved performance on their instruments compared to those who remain awake. The same effect has been observed in athletes, surgeons in training, and typists. The sleeping brain appears to replay motor sequences, smoothing their execution and embedding them more deeply into the neural circuitry that governs skilled action. In this sense, the nap is not a break from practice. It is practice of a different and perhaps more efficient kind. Napping and creativity share a deeper relationship than intuition suggests. Beyond the theta wave creativity effect observed during N1 sleep, REM sleep appears to support a broader form of associative cognition. The ability to detect connections between distantly related concepts, to find unexpected solutions, and to generate novel ideas. A study from the University of California, San Diego, found that participants who entered REM sleep during a nap showed significantly improved performance on a remote associates test, a standard measure of creative thinking, compared to those who had non-REM naps or remained awake. The dreaming brain, it appears, thinks in connections rather than categories. The relationship between napping and immune function has received increasing research attention. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that following a night of restricted sleep, limited to 2 hours, participants who took 2 30-minute naps on the following day showed normalized levels of interleukin-6 and norepinephrine, both immune and stress markers that had been elevated by the sleep restriction. The non-napping control group showed no such normalization. Researchers concluded that napping appeared to offer a degree of immune recovery from the effects of sleep debt, a finding with broad relevance for the many adults who regularly sleep fewer than 7 hours per night. Napping in early childhood is not simply a cultural practice. It appears to serve a distinct neurological function. Infants spend approximately 16 hours per day asleep, much of it in REM sleep, which researchers believe is essential for rapid synaptic development and neural circuit formation. As children enter toddlerhood, daytime napping remains physiologically meaningful. A study from the University of Arizona found that toddlers who napped showed significantly better retention of newly learned information compared to non-napping peers, and that the memory advantage persisted across days. The napping brain in childhood is not merely resting. It is building the architecture of cognition. Many of history's most celebrated thinkers, artists, and leaders were known nappers. Winston Churchill reportedly napped for 2 hours every afternoon, crediting the practice with doubling his productive output. Albert Einstein was said to take brief naps in his armchair. Leonardo da Vinci was described by contemporaries as following a polyphasic sleep schedule that included multiple short rest periods throughout the day and night. Eleanor Roosevelt reportedly napped before major public speaking engagements. Whether these habits caused or merely accompanied their cognitive capacities, the pattern is worth noticing. Among those with the most demanding intellectual lives, The deliberate rest of a nap was not avoided. It was protected. The timing of a nap within the circadian day matters significantly for its quality and effects. Napping in the early afternoon, between approximately 1 and 3 in the afternoon, aligns with the natural circadian dip in alertness and produces the deepest, most restorative sleep. Napping later than 4 in the afternoon risks interfering with nighttime sleep onset by reducing the accumulated adenosine sleep pressure needed to fall asleep easily at night. Morning naps, taken shortly after waking, tend to contain higher proportions of REM sleep. Since REM sleep is weighted toward the end of the night and into the morning hours, the timing of a nap, in other words, changes what kind of rest it provides. Older adults have long been observed to nap more frequently than younger adults, but recent research has suggested a more complex picture. A 2022 study in the journal Nature Aging found that genetic variants associated with habitual napping also correlated with slightly larger brain volume, suggesting that some tendency toward daytime rest may have neurological roots rather than purely compensatory origins. Researchers are now exploring whether increased napping in midlife and older age may represent not merely a response to nighttime sleep disruption, but an adaptive behavior with its own independent value for aging brain health. The Japanese have a cultural practice called inamuri, a word that translates approximately as sleeping while present. In Japanese work culture, falling asleep briefly during meetings, on public transportation, or in shared spaces has historically carried less stigma than in Western contexts, and in some interpretations has been associated with dedication, of being so engaged with one's responsibilities that the body simply requires rest. Inamuri practitioners are not expected to be deeply asleep. The posture of rest, taken publicly, signals engagement with the social space rather than withdrawal from it. The cultural framing of napping as lazy or industrious, shameful or admirable, varies enormously across societies. Even as the biology remains identical, the brain's default mode network is a set of interconnected regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the angular gyrus, that become most active when a person is not focused on a specific external task. For many years, it was described as the brain's resting state network, activated during mind wandering and daydreaming. More recently, neuroscientists have identified it as central to self-referential thought, autobiographical memory processing, and social cognition. During the transition into sleep, default mode network activity shifts in characteristic ways that may support the integration of the day's emotional and social experiences, a process that napping may help to gently advance. Procedural memory, the kind of knowledge embedded in how to do things, resides primarily in a set of brain structures including the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, and the motor cortex. Unlike declarative memory, which can often be consciously recalled and verbally described, procedural memory is largely implicit. It guides behavior without conscious awareness. The process of moving a new skill from effortful, conscious execution to smooth, automatic performance is called automatization, and it depends on sleep. Research has shown that naps containing sleep spindles and slow-wave sleep advance this automatization process measurably, compressing what might otherwise require additional days of practice into a single afternoon of rest. without any repetition required. The relationship between napping and cardiovascular health has been studied in large populations. A study of over 34,000 Greek adults, published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, found that regular midday napping was associated with a 37% lower risk of coronary mortality over a 6-year follow-up period. After controlling for diet, physical activity, and other lifestyle factors, the protective effect was strongest in working men. Researchers suggested that the midday nap's role in reducing cardiovascular stress reactivity, lowering cortisol, reducing sympathetic nervous system activity, and allowing the heart rate and blood pressure to briefly settle, may contribute to long-term cardiac protection. We have now traveled through 40 facts about the napping brain, and a pattern has been emerging. Quietly, consistently, napping is not a behavior the brain tolerates. It is a behavior the brain appears to have been designed for. The circadian dip is built in. The hippocampal buffer clears during sleep. Adenosine metabolizes. Stress chemistry recedes. Memory consolidates. Emotional regulation restores. Every mechanism we have examined points toward the same quiet conclusion: that rest, in the form of a nap, is not a departure from the brain's productive life. It is one of its oldest and most essential activities. You're still here, still with us, still breathing, still drifting gently through these quiet facts about your own resting mind. Take a slow breath. Notice how your body may already feel a little different than when we began. A little heavier, a little softer, a little less held. We're exploring sleep together tonight. You and I, and every quiet mind listening in the dark. There's no rush. Let's continue. Not everyone experiences naps the same way. Roughly 30% of adults describe themselves as unable to nap, lying down during the day but finding sleep elusive, their minds remaining too alert to transition. Research has identified several factors that influence nap ease. Genetic variants affecting adenosine receptor sensitivity, baseline anxiety levels, exposure to light in the napping environment, and accumulated sleep debt. Those with higher sleep pressure, meaning greater adenosine accumulation, tend to nap more easily. Those with lower sleep pressure, from having slept well, may find daytime napping more difficult. The inability to nap is, in this sense, often a sign of adequate overnight sleep rather than a failure of the napping brain. The hypnagogic state, the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, is among the most subjectively interesting experiences the human brain produces. During N1 sleep, the brain generates spontaneous imagery, fragmented thoughts, and sensory impressions that feel both vivid and strange. Faces without context, spoken words with no apparent origin, falling sensations, soft geometric patterns of light. These experiences arise from the brain's spontaneous neural activity as external sensory input fades and internal signal generation takes over. Neurologically, hypnagogia involves the disengagement of the prefrontal cortex from conscious narrative control and the rise of thalamocortical activity that produces the brain's own imagery. The napping brain, even in its lightest moments, is generating experience. Throughout history, the hypnagogic state has been associated with creative and philosophical insight. Aristotle wrote of the images that appear between wakefulness and sleep. Salvador Dali described using a technique of suspended drowsiness to access imagery for his paintings. The mathematician Ramanujan reported receiving mathematical insights in dreams and in the half-waking state of early morning. In contemporary neuroscience, the hypnagogic state is now understood as a window of reduced, top-down cognitive control, in which the associative, pattern-completing functions of the brain operate with unusual freedom. What ancient thinkers described as inspiration or revelation, modern researchers are beginning to map onto neural circuitry. The brain produces four main categories of electrical oscillation during different states. Beta waves, occurring at 13 to 30 cycles per second, dominate during active, focused waking. Alpha waves, at 8 to 12 cycles per second, characterize relaxed wakefulness and early drowsiness. Theta waves, at 4 to 8 cycles per second, mark the transition into sleep and light sleep stages. Delta waves, at 1 to 4 cycles per second, define deep, slow wave sleep. As you move through a nap, your brain descends through these states in sequence. The faster, noisier waves of waking, gradually giving way to the slower, deeper oscillations of rest. The brain quiets in wavelength, even as its activity deepens. Napping has been shown to improve perceptual learning, the ability of the brain and sensory systems to become more precise in detecting subtle differences. In studies where subjects trained on a visual discrimination task, those who napped for 90 minutes after training showed performance improvements comparable to those who had an entire night of sleep. Subjects who stayed awake showed no improvement or slight decline. The visual cortex, it appears, uses sleep to consolidate perceptual refinements made earlier in the day. The sleeping eye, in a sense, learns to see more clearly. The pineal gland, a small structure deep in the brain's center, secretes melatonin in response to darkness, signaling the body to prepare for sleep. Melatonin is not a sleeping agent in the way sedatives are. It does not force sleep, but rather communicates to the body's systems that darkness has arrived and rest is appropriate. During a nap, particularly in a darkened environment, melatonin levels rise mildly. This rise contributes to the ease of falling asleep and the depth of the nap's early stages. The ancient light-sensitive cells that govern melatonin secretion evolved long before mammals existed. In organisms that needed to coordinate their biology with the rhythms of light and dark on Earth, there is a phenomenon called sleep-dependent memory reactivation, in which the brain, during sleep, spontaneously replays the neural patterns associated with experiences from the preceding waking period. This replay occurs most prominently in the hippocampus during slow-wave sleep and in the cortex during REM sleep. Researchers using implanted electrodes in rodents have recorded the firing patterns of individual neurons during learning and then observed nearly identical firing sequences spontaneously occurring hours later during sleep. Human neuroimaging studies have found analogous patterns of brain activity during sleep that correspond to waking experience. The sleeping brain is not silent. It is running a quiet review of everything the waking brain encountered. Emotional memory is treated differently by the sleeping brain than neutral or purely informational memory. Research by Walker and colleagues at the University of California, Berkeley, found that REM sleep, specifically, characterized by low norepinephrine levels in the brain, strips the emotional charge from memories while preserving their informational content. In other words, sleep helps the brain remember what happened without continuing to feel the full intensity of how it felt. This overnight therapy function of REM sleep has been proposed as relevant to understanding how the brain processes and recovers from difficult experiences over time. The nap's role in this process depends on whether it contains REM sleep, more likely in longer naps taken earlier in the day. A study published in 2024 in Nature Communications examined resting brain activity in adults following either a daytime nap or an equivalent period of quiet rest, using functional magnetic resonance imaging. Researchers found that napping produced distinctive changes in the connectivity patterns of the default mode network that were not observed during quiet wakefulness. These changes were associated with improved performance on measures of emotional integration and self-referential memory, the kind of thinking that allows a person to situate current experiences within their broader personal narrative. Napping, in this framing, is not merely a cognitive recovery tool. It may also be part of how the brain continuously updates its understanding of itself. Halfway through our journey tonight, the picture of the napping brain is already rich. It is a brain clearing its short-term stores and filing the day's learning into permanence. It is a brain quieting its stress chemistry and restoring emotional balance. It is a brain that becomes, briefly, more open to connections it would not have found while rigidly awake. It is a brain that, in its lightest sleep, generates imagery and ideas that artists and scientists throughout history have recognized as meaningful. The nap is the brain's private revision session, and every afternoon, the invitation to attend it returns. Breathe slowly here for a moment. Every cell in your body is being replaced, slowly, continuously, almost invisibly. The person lying here tonight carries a slightly different body than the one who woke this morning. And yet, something carries forward. Something persists beneath all the change. Tonight is one small moment in a process of continuous renewal that began before your first memory. Your rest this evening is part of that renewal, not an interruption of your life, but one of its quietest necessities. You don't have to understand it. You only need to allow it. And we continue the journey. The practice of napping with intent, setting a mental intention before a nap to work on a specific problem or consolidate a specific skill, has been explored in several sleep research laboratories. While the evidence remains preliminary, subjects in some studies who set specific intentions before napping showed slightly preferential consolidation of intention-related material compared to incidentally learned material. The mechanism is not fully understood, but may involve the brain's attention systems flagging specific neural patterns as high priority for replay during sleep. The implication? That the sleeping mind may be somewhat responsive to waking intentions is, if confirmed, a quietly remarkable finding. The relationship between napping and language learning has been of interest to researchers in both neuroscience and education. A study from the University of Sheffield found that infants who napped within 4 hours of learning new words retained those words significantly better than infants who remained awake. The effect was not observed when the nap was delayed beyond this window, suggesting that the timing of sleep relative to learning, not just the sleep itself, influence consolidation. The brain appears most ready to consolidate new linguistic information in the hours immediately following its acquisition, a finding with relevance for language instruction at any age. Some of the most detailed research on napping comes from studies of NASA astronauts and military personnel, populations in which cognitive performance under fatigue has direct practical implications. NASA Studies on napping during spaceflight found that brief naps of 30 to 40 minutes meaningfully improved cognitive performance in astronauts during extended missions. These studies also found that the timing and length of naps needed to be carefully calibrated to the individual's circadian phase to maximize benefit and minimize sleep inertia. NASA subsequently developed napping protocols for long-duration spaceflight that incorporated scheduled rest periods as a formal component of crew health management, not as an optional accommodation, but as a mission-considered procedure. The term polyphasic sleep refers to sleep distributed across multiple periods within a 24-hour day, as opposed to the monophasic single overnight sleep block common in modern Western societies. Many non-human mammals, including dogs, cats, rodents, and most primates, are naturally polyphasic. Anthropological studies of hunter-gatherer populations, including the Hadza of Tanzania and the San of Botswana, have found sleep patterns that tend to include both a primary overnight sleep period and a variable midday rest period. These observations suggest that the modern single sleep schedule may be a relatively recent cultural adaptation rather than an expression of the human body's natural rhythms. The brain's reward system, centered on the release of dopamine in circuits connecting the ventral tegmental area, the nucleus accumbens, and the prefrontal cortex, is sensitive to sleep quality and duration. Sleep deprivation increases the sensitivity of dopamine reward circuits, making waking rewards feel more compelling and the drive to seek them more intense, a pattern associated with increased impulsive behavior and reduced capacity for delayed gratification. Conversely, adequate sleep, including nap recovery from sleep debt, normalizes dopamine signaling. A well-rested brain, in this sense, is not merely more alert, it is better calibrated to make decisions that align with its own long-term values. The relationship between napping and physical athletic performance is receiving growing research attention. A study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that a 30-minute nap following a training session improved subsequent sprint performance, reaction time, and muscular power output in competitive soccer players compared to a non-napping control condition. Similar findings have been replicated in tennis players, swimmers, and track and field athletes. Sports science organizations in Europe and North America have begun formally incorporating scheduled napping into high-performance athlete recovery protocols. The body's physical repair, the synthesis of muscle proteins, the clearance of exercise-induced inflammation, appears to accelerate during sleep, even brief sleep. Insulin sensitivity, the efficiency with which cells respond to insulin and absorb glucose, is affected by sleep. Both total sleep deprivation and chronic mild sleep restriction have been shown to reduce insulin sensitivity, contributing to elevated blood glucose levels and increased risk of metabolic disruption over time. A 2023 study from the University of Chicago found that subjects who recovered from partial sleep restriction through napping showed partial restoration of insulin sensitivity compared to those who remained sleep-deprived. The napping body, in this sense, is not only a brain recovering, it is a metabolic system being gently recalibrated. The phenomenon of microsleeps, involuntary episodes of sleep lasting from a fraction of a second to several seconds, occurs automatically in severely sleep-deprived individuals. During a microsleep, the brain's visual processing centers and frontal lobes briefly enter a sleep-like state even while a person believes themselves to be awake. Microsleeps are associated with the majority of fatigue-related driving incidents and are considered one of the most concerning consequences of sleep deprivation. One of the most reliable ways to reduce their occurrence is regular, proactive napping, taking rest before the need becomes urgent rather than waiting until exhaustion forces it. The scheduled nap, in this context, is a form of quiet neurological self-care. The cooling of core body temperature is one of the brain's primary signals for initiating sleep. Body temperature follows a circadian rhythm, rising through the morning, peaking in the early to mid-afternoon, and declining through the evening to reach its lowest point in the early morning hours around 4 in the morning, creating a comfortable sleeping environment during a nap. Using a light blanket, darkening the room, or keeping room temperature slightly lower supports the temperature drop that facilitates sleep onset and deepens nap quality. The body's readiness for sleep is, in part, a matter of degrees, written into its temperature rather than its intentions. Dreams can occur during naps, though their character varies depending on which sleep stage is reached. Naps containing primarily N1 and N2 sleep tend to produce fragmentary, loosely associative hypnagogic experiences rather than the fully narrativized, emotionally vivid dreams of REM sleep. Naps long enough to contain REM sleep, typically those lasting 90 minutes or more, produce recognizable dream experiences with characters, scenes, and emotional arcs. People who nap regularly and reach REM sleep report that nap dreams are often more emotionally resonant and thematically coherent than many of their nighttime dreams, possibly because they occur closer to waking, making recall easier. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from the brainstem through the neck and into the chest and abdomen, plays a central role in the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes called the rest and digest system. During wakefulness, particularly during demanding or socially taxing activities, the sympathetic nervous system tends to dominate. During sleep, including the light sleep of a nap, the parasympathetic system regains its footing. Vagal tone, the strength and regularity of parasympathetic signaling through the vagus, increases during sleep. A nap, in this light, is not merely a brain event. It is a full-body shift from activation to restoration. Blood pressure follows a circadian pattern, and it is responsive to sleep. During sleep, blood pressure typically drops by 10 to 20% below waking levels, a phenomenon called nocturnal dipping. People whose blood pressure fails to dip during sleep show higher risk of cardiovascular events over time. Research has found that a brief afternoon nap produces a similar, shorter-lived drop in blood pressure. A 2019 meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that midday napping was associated with measurable reductions in average blood pressure in adults with elevated readings. The afternoon nap, quietly, also tends the heart. The brain's sensitivity to physical discomfort is modulated by sleep. Sleep deprivation lowers pain thresholds, meaning that the same stimulus produces a greater experience of discomfort in a sleep-restricted person than in a well-rested one. This effect has been demonstrated in controlled laboratory conditions using standardized stimuli. Conversely, recovery sleep, including napping, raises these thresholds. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, found that both deep, slow-wave sleep and the restorative effects of rest could be partially explained by the activity of the somatosensory cortex and its interaction with the thalamus during sleep. The body in sleep is, in a measurable sense, more at ease with itself. Thermoregulation. The body's ability to maintain a stable internal temperature is largely suspended during REM sleep, unlike non-REM sleep, during which the body continues to respond to temperature changes. REM sleep renders the body temporarily unable to actively regulate its own temperature through shivering or sweating. This is why ambient temperature during sleep matters considerably. The sleeping body in REM tends not to compensate for an environment that is too warm or too cool. For naps that may reach REM sleep, maintaining a comfortable ambient temperature is not simply a matter of comfort. It is a condition that allows the deepest sleep stages to function as intended. We now understand that napping serves the brain across multiple timescales. In the minutes following a nap, alertness and mood recover. Adenosine is cleared, and reaction time improves. Over the following hours, the effects of memory consolidation emerge. Information retained more precisely, skills executed more fluently, over days and weeks. Regularly napping individuals show more stable cognitive performance, lower average cortisol levels, and greater heart rate variability. Over months and years, research suggests habitual moderate napping may support brain volume, metabolic health, and cardiovascular resilience. The nap's benefits, in other words, are not only immediate, they compound. Research on napping in children with attention difficulties has produced findings of clinical interest. Children who struggle with sustained attention tend to show disrupted sleep architecture, with less slow-wave sleep and more fragmented nighttime rest than their peers. Studies examining daytime cognitive performance in these children have found that those who napped showed measurably better impulse control, working memory, and sustained attention in the afternoon hours compared to non-napping peers. While napping is not a treatment for attention difficulties, these findings point toward the possibility that supporting sleep, including daytime rest, may be an underutilized consideration in managing attention-related challenges. The brain's working memory, the cognitive system that temporarily holds and manipulates information in active awareness, is one of the most reliable predictors of general cognitive performance. It is also one of the functions most rapidly affected by sleep restriction and most reliably restored by napping. Working memory capacity depends heavily on the prefrontal cortex, which is notably sensitive to changes in sleep. A 2022 study in the journal Neuropsychologia found that a 60-minute nap restored working memory capacity in sleep-restricted adults to levels statistically indistinguishable from fully rested baselines. The nap, in this sense, gently returned the brain to itself. The relationship between napping and mental health is nuanced and still under investigation. Moderate napping, one nap per day lasting less than 30 minutes, has been associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety in several large survey studies. Excessive napping, multiple naps per day, or naps lasting more than 90 minutes, has been associated in some studies with increased risk of depression and cognitive decline. Though researchers note this association likely reflects underlying health conditions that both cause excessive sleep and increase those risks, rather than napping itself causing harm. The distinction between napping as a restorative practice and napping as a symptom of physical illness is an active area of clinical research. The relationship between light and nap quality is often underestimated. Even closed eyelids transmit approximately 10% of ambient light to the retina, which continues to signal the suprachiasmatic nucleus and suppress melatonin even during light sleep. Napping in full daylight, without a sleep mask or darkened room, is associated with lighter, more fragmented sleep and reduced slow-wave activity compared to napping in darkness. Sleep researchers consistently recommend darkness or a sleep mask, quiet or consistent ambient sound, and horizontal body positioning as the 3 environmental conditions most strongly associated with improved nap depth and duration. Music and the napping brain have an interesting relationship. Research has found that slow-tempo music, played at 60 to 80 beats per minute, can facilitate sleep onset by gently guiding the heart rate and breathing towards slower, more sleep-compatible rhythms. This effect, called auditory entrainment, has been observed in both adults and children and is consistent across a range of musical styles, as long as tempo remains low and lyrical content is absent or minimal. The brain's tendency to synchronize rhythmic internal processes with external rhythmic stimuli, a phenomenon called neural entrainment, can be used deliberately to soften the transition into nap sleep. The concept of sleep architecture refers to the specific sequence and proportion of sleep stages within a sleep period. Healthy adult nighttime sleep typically shows 4 to 6 complete cycles, each lasting approximately 90 minutes, with slow-wave sleep dominant in the first half of the night and REM sleep dominant in the second half. Nap architecture differs from nighttime architecture in ways determined by the timing of the nap, the individual's accumulated sleep debt, and the individual's circadian phase. A nap has its own architecture, not simply a compressed version of night sleep, but a different configuration shaped by different biological conditions, which is why naps produce the specific effects they do. Napping after learning a new language has been studied in adults undergoing language instruction. A study from the University of Bern found that participants who napped for 90 minutes after a vocabulary learning session retained significantly more new words 48 hours later than participants who remained awake during the equivalent period. The benefit was specifically associated with slow-wave sleep, as measured by electroencephalographic monitoring of delta wave activity. The benefit was strongest for words without clear associative links, precisely the kind of arbitrary connections that are hardest to learn through repetition alone, and most dependent on hippocampal consolidation for retention. In 2024, researchers at the University of Zurich published a study examining targeted memory reactivation, playing soft cue sounds associated with specific learning tasks during subsequent sleep, and its effects on nap-based memory consolidation. Participants who had learned word location associations and then heard the cue sounds softly during a subsequent nap showed 30% better recall than those who napped without cues. The findings suggested that the napping brain is not merely passively replaying the day's events, but may be responsive to subtle external signals that guide what is prioritized for consolidation. The sleeping mind, it appears, is still listening. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala communicate through a set of inhibitory circuits that allow the prefrontal cortex to moderate the intensity of emotional responses generated by the amygdala. These circuits are among the most sleep-sensitive in the brain, among the first to soften under sleep deprivation, and among the first to recover with adequate sleep. A single afternoon nap of 60 to 90 minutes has been shown to strengthen the functional connectivity between these regions, as measured by resting state functional magnetic resonance imaging. The napping brain, in this sense, is rebuilding its own capacity for emotional poise, restoring the gentle architecture of regulation that allows a person to meet the world with steadiness. By this point in our journey, the answer to the question that began it, what happens to your brain during a nap, has become rich and many-layered. The brain is clearing adenosine and resetting alertness. It is filing memories and practicing skills. It is quieting stress chemistry and restoring emotional regulation. It is running its glymphatic clearance processes, gently metabolizing the day's accumulated byproducts. It is dreaming. Sometimes it is listening. Perhaps it is doing. In the language of biology, the most productive thing a brain can do after hours of waking effort. It is resting, and in resting, becoming ready again. The nap is not a gap in the day. It is the hinge on which the day quietly turns. Sleep does not come when you try to find it. It comes when you stop. You know this already. The harder the mind reaches for rest, the further away rest seems. And yet, when the effort finally falls away, sleep arrives without announcement, without drama, without any particular fanfare at all. This is, perhaps, the deepest thing the napping brain teaches us. Not how to try harder, but how to let go. Allow this to be that moment, if it wants to be. We'll continue with the final facts. A nap needs no special preparation. A pillow, a quiet space, a few unscheduled minutes. The brain brings everything else. It has been ready all day to begin, quietly waiting for permission to do what it already knows how to do. In slow-wave sleep, the brain's electrical activity synchronizes across wide regions into slow, rolling waves. Millions of neurons rise and fall together, like breathing, like tides moving through a dark and patient sea. The sleeping body lowers its metabolic rate by approximately 15% during non-REM sleep. Energy that was sustaining wakefulness is quietly redirected toward repair and renewal, toward the body taking care of itself without being asked. Some researchers describe the hippocampal sharp-wave ripples of sleep, brief bursts of coordinated neural activity, as the brain speaking to itself, a private language, a quiet internal review of everything the waking day brought in. Animals nap too. Elephants in the wild have been recorded sleeping while standing for as little as 2 hours per night, supplementing with brief lying down naps when circumstances allow. Even within the animal kingdom, rest is adapted to circumstance, and always, somehow, found. The brain in N2 sleep produces K-complexes, large, slow waves that appear to suppress sensory processing, protecting sleep from disruption while also participating in memory consolidation. They are the brain's way of saying, "Not now. We are busy with something quieter, something that matters more than noise." Muscle tone decreases during sleep. The body softens. Tension that has been held in the jaw, in the shoulders, in the hands, releases without instruction. The body knows the shape of rest better than the mind does. It has always known. It simply waits for the mind to step aside. Napping in a hammock has been shown in a small but carefully controlled study from the University of Geneva to deepen non-REM sleep and increase sleep spindle density compared to napping on a stationary surface. The gentle rocking motion apparently entrains the brain's slow oscillations, nudging it more readily into deeper sleep stages. The body responds to gentle rhythm. It always has. Long before hammocks, it learned this from the movement of breathing, from the tide, from the slow rocking of the world itself. The thalamus, often called the brain's relay station, plays a meaningful role in gating sensory information during sleep. As sleep deepens, the thalamus progressively reduces the flow of sensory signals to the cortex, quieting the brain's input channels one by one, allowing internal processing to proceed without interference. The world does not disappear during a nap. The brain simply closes its doors, draws the curtain, and begins its own quiet work inside. Researchers have found that brief naps reduce what is called ego depletion, the reduction in self-regulatory capacity that accumulates over hours of decision-making, social demands, and cognitive effort. After a nap, subjects show improved capacity for self-control, greater patience, and higher tolerance for frustration. The napping brain, in this sense, does not merely restore information processing. It restores the capacity to be a kind and considered person. The body's inflammatory response is modulated by sleep. Short-term sleep loss elevates inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. Recovery napping reduces these markers measurably. The sleeping body is also, quietly, tending its own internal chemistry, a form of care that asks nothing of the conscious mind. Dreams during naps sometimes carry something unexpected. The chemist August Kekulé reportedly arrived at the ring structure of benzene through a dream. Paul McCartney described the melody of Yesterday arriving complete in a dream. Elias Howe credited a dream with suggesting the needle placement that made the sewing machine possible. The sleeping mind makes connections the waking mind cannot always find. The nap opens the same doors. In the deepest slow-wave sleep, the brain's cortex shows remarkable synchrony. Slow oscillations, long, sweeping electrical waves, travel across the brain's surface like gentle weather systems, touching region after region in sequence. Researchers watching these waves on high-density electroencephalographic recordings have described them as beautiful. A sleeping brain, seen in this way, moves like water. Melatonin produced during a nap does not persist at high levels after waking. The brain adjusts gently to renewed light exposure, easing melatonin production back down within minutes. The chemistry of rest dissolves as gently as it arrived, like mist lifting from a field as the morning returns. Sleep selectively strengthens emotional associations, things that mattered, that moved us, while allowing neutral details to soften and fade. The sleeping brain is not a neutral recorder. It curates. It decides, in its own quiet way, what deserves to remain. It is, in this sense, always tending the garden of who you are. Researchers studying the effects of gratitude practices on sleep quality have found that people who spend a few minutes before a nap reflecting on positive experiences or feelings of appreciation tend to fall asleep more easily and show less fragmented sleep. The brain carries the emotional tone of its preceding waking state into sleep, beginning a nap from a place of quiet appreciation, rather than urgency or effort. may gently shape the quality of what follows. The phrase "sleep on it" exists in languages around the world. In French, in Japanese, in Swahili, in Arabic, in many others. Every culture that developed this expression was encoding, in everyday language, the same observation: that difficult decisions feel clearer after rest. That perspective shifts, that the mind, after sleep, meets the same problem differently. Folk wisdom and neuroscience, here, tell the same quiet story. Napping does not make nighttime sleep unnecessary. The two forms of rest are complementary, not competing. A short midday nap reduces the afternoon cortisol peak and the accumulated fatigue of the waking day, without substantially reducing nighttime sleep pressure in most people. Provided the nap ends before mid-afternoon and does not exceed 30 to 40 minutes. The brain does not choose between daytime and nighttime rest. Given appropriate structure, it welcomes both. The spinal cord and peripheral nervous system also benefit from sleep. During slow-wave sleep, growth hormone, released in its largest daily pulse during the first deep sleep period, supports tissue repair throughout the body, including muscle fibers, connective tissue, and spinal structures that have been compressed and stressed during a day of upright movement. Rest reaches further than we often realize. It is not only the brain that recovers while you lie still. In the end, what happens to your brain during a nap is this: it comes home. It returns from the extended effort of staying alert, staying social, staying organized, staying present. It lowers its vigilance. It softens its boundaries. It allows the slow waves of deep rest to move through it, carrying with them the day's gathered material, sorting it, filing it, releasing what doesn't need to be kept. And when the nap ends, the brain re-emerges, not identical to when it entered, but subtly renewed, a little more ready, a little more itself. And so, our quiet journey through the napping brain comes gently to a close. We traveled from the afternoon circadian dip, that ancient signal written into human biology long before the concept of a schedule existed, all the way to the slow rolling waves of synchronized cortical activity that neuroscientists have, in Quieta moments, described as beautiful. We discovered that sleep spindles are the brain's filing system, that the hippocampus, when given even a brief window of rest, begins to release its holdings into longer memory, that a single afternoon nap can lower cortisol, restore prefrontal function, reduce the brain's heightened emotional reactivity, and rebuild the capacity for patience and care. From the hypnagogic threshold where Edison and Dali sought their ideas, to the glymphatic channels, now confirmed in human tissue, quietly clearing what the waking brain leaves behind. We have glimpsed how the nap is not a pause in the brain's life. It is among its most vital chapters. The napping brain reminds us that productivity and rest are not opposites. Much of the brain's most meaningful work happens in silence, in stillness, in the soft darkness behind closed eyes, in the spaces where the waking world cannot follow. Rest reveals patience. It reveals trust. In the body's capacity to tend itself, in the brain's ancient knowledge of what it needs. Without rest, the brain becomes narrower, more reactive, less able to see the connections that matter. By pausing to rest, we give back to ourselves something that effort alone cannot provide: In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can. As deep as possible. Think about the unity of every sleeping brain tonight. Yours. And countless others around the world. Each one running the same ancient processes. Each one clearing and consolidating and gently restoring in its own particular darkness. You are not alone in this. Every mind that rests tonight enters the same currents that have carried sleeping humans since the beginning of our species. Let your entire being dissolve into that quiet, into the slow waves, into the warm stillness, into the space where thought becomes simply rest. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left. Only peace. Tonight, you've rested somewhere quiet. Inside the science of rest itself, a gentle like or subscribe could guide one more tired mind to find their way here too. It only takes a moment. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. The napping brain, your brain, is still unfolding right now. Without your effort, without your watching, you don't need to hold any of this. It was never yours to carry. You've traveled inward tonight, through the architecture of something most people pass through every day without ever pausing to notice. You followed sleep spindles and adenosine and slow-rolling waves through the corridors of your own resting mind, and found them, somehow, familiar. You can allow these thoughts of the napping brain to fade now, like the last image of a dream at dawn. Present, then softer, then simply part of everything, leaving only the quiet, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if all you've been carrying today is being sorted by careful, invisible hands, and is simply setting itself down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way a nap carries, not with force, not with announcement, but with quiet inevitability, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the brain will still know its rhythms. The afternoon dip will return. The spindles will fire again. Sleep will come again, as it always has. Even in the deepest rest, something new is still becoming. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul, and remember, even the quietest rest is doing something remarkable. Good night.